You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Justice is Served here on Black Hollywood Live. My name is Chelsea Galicia and I am joined by my co-host Shaka Smith to bring you the latest and perhaps greatest of this week's legal stories in the news. Just in case this is your first time joining us, again, my name is Chelsea and I am a workers' compensation attorney who's just born and raised here and around LA, but Shaka's a little more interesting than that. He comes from Miami, then went to Princeton undergrad and DC for law school, and then moved out here to LA about 5 years ago to pursue acting and fitness modeling. And I've just been a workers' compensation attorney since the womb, practically. We've got a great but abbreviated show for you today because later on we are going to be taping the special for Making a Murder. Yes. We're really excited about that. And so we put most of the focus this week on that show. And so we still have some crucial stories that we wanted to bring you this week before we go over there. So we'll invite you to join us for Making a Murder later over on AfterBuzz. But before that, we've got to get to this week's legal news. The first being breaking news in the Bill Cosby case. So this week, Bill Cosby's attorneys were in court arguing to the judge that these charges should be dropped. And when I mean these charges, the indecent
sexual assault in Pennsylvania.
Right, against Andrea Constand, that he was arrested for in December, just like months before the deadline, can't I think of the word? The statute of limitations was about to run out, and the DA all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, pressed this charge against Bill Cosby, and now his attorneys are arguing that the charge needs to be dropped because there was a deal with the prosecutor that the prosecutor would not go after him for this charge specifically. And that is why Bill Cosby participated in his deposition in the Andrea Constand matter, where he disclosed some very salacious details, including using Quaaludes and things like that, which have then turned around and
come back now
to sort of bite him.
Yeah.
So over the last, 2 days, I guess yesterday and today, the defense attorneys were saying there was an oral deal with the prosecutor to not press charges, and that's the only reason why the attorney allowed his client to sit for this deposition. This has been going on for like a day straight. We were supposed to hear this morning. Then the judge wanted to go to lunch to hear more from the prosecutor, who said that this is not true. Somebody can't buy their way out of prosecution. And just within the last hour, the judge decided. Shaka, what do you want to tell us what he said?
Yeah, well, the judge said the case will absolutely proceed. It was a troublesome case from the beginning. The logic made sense. You know, we were promised a complete and total immunity, and that is why he went and did the deposition for the civil case.
But see, here's the thing: even when you do a deposition, you participate. If there are specific questions that you don't want to answer, you can assert your Fifth Amendment. So for his attorney to say that's why I let him be involved or participate at all in the deposition just doesn't make sense.
Well, the reasoning was, because the former DA came on the stand, and the former DA testified that this was in fact true, that there was a verbal agreement made. So that was
11 years ago.
11 years ago. So we did establish that took place. But he said he did so because he felt that the victim would not get justice in legal court, so that this way it opened the door for Cosby to testify in a deposition in the civil matter, and maybe she could at least get some recompense financially.
Well, and then I saw that he said that they didn't prosecute because they didn't believe that the victim had enough credibility.
Yeah, and she, at the time, the story had changed a few times from her.
I understand that they said they didn't like the fact that she went to go see a civil attorney first before going to police. And she didn't go to police right away. I think it was close to a year that she
and the
waited.
story had changed over several times over this period of time. So they felt they couldn't really build a strong legal case, but if they gave him this immunity, he might kind of hang himself for the civil case, and at least you can get some sort of justice in that sense. However, these kind of agreements, you can't have a verbal agreement to not be prosecuted for eternity. There's a reason we say put that in writing.
Right.
And you have to have some reliability of the court system to not be manipulated by those who are wealthy, because we don't know in the last 11 years how much money may have transferred hands between the former DA and Mr. Cosby. We're not allowed that opportunity for investigation, so that's why when these deals are made, they're best made in writing.
They can't be secret.
Yeah.
Otherwise, can you imagine everybody and their mother would be like, hey, wait a minute.
I also had a verbal agreement.
Yeah. So it's with good reason that this argument did not fly.
Yes.
And so there is no trial date as of this moment, although if I keep refreshing the story, we might find out about that soon.
But on a positive note for Mr. Cosby, before this came down, the Chloe Goins, who had alleged sexual assault at the Playboy Mansion, she did dismiss her own lawsuit. So a little good and bad.
All right. So that will be very interesting to see what happens at trial. All right. And so now on to Laquan McDonald. We found a new detail about this case, and it involves the reason why the Dashcam microphone didn't work.
Yeah.
There's no audio on the video. You'll recall that this is a Chicago man who was moving away from police officers holding perhaps a small knife when he was shot 16 times.
Yeah.
And there was no audio, and now we know why.
It turns out Jason Van Dyke, the cop involved, had tampered with his dash cam. And on this particular time...
Intentionally
tampered with his dash cam. He had done so before, and on this particular time, he made sure the mics were out of sync so it could not capture any audio.
Yeah, and apparently this is not the only time that this has happened, and he's not the only officer that has done this.
I think that's what's more troubling is it seems like it's an accepted practice of the department.
Yeah, 1,800 police maintenance logs show a trend of cops intentionally and routinely tampering with their dash cams and mics in an effort to block audio.
Yeah.
So pretty incredible. I don't know, maybe but oh my goodness. They say that they're going to come down hard on any officer who does this, but as of yet, we haven't seen anything.
They're not charged with any obstruction of justice, no destruction of governmental property.
At the very least. And I was thinking that beyond, that those charges would be beyond what should happen for, not doing your job. There's a specific charge for officers who don't
dereliction of duty.
Correct, who don't maintain just their basic duties to perform the job the way that they're supposed to. And then on top of that, I think they should be charged with the same thing that you or I would be charged with if we tampered with those things.
Absolutely, and it's so indicative of where we are. We've all had this discussion of why are these cameras not better? Why are we not getting audio sometimes? Why is it so grainy? Why is the footage not better? And now it almost feels like a concerted attempt to kind of keep that technology from progressing to a point where the officers are absolutely held accountable for what they do on the job.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how often this happened. In less than a year, from September 2014 to July 2015, there were 90 recorded instances of microphones missing from police cars. So I guess this is has to be a community effort to keep the police accountable, to keep asking about the condition of these.
Well, a harsher penalty in the police department would certainly stop them from being tampered with.
Right. And then there were radio logs that do speak to what was going on at the time that Laquan McDonald was shot, and we now know that there was an officer who asked if anybody had a taser.
And of 8 officers on the scene, no one had a taser.
Right. So clearly 7 out of 8 officers didn't feel that they were threatened with their life, and that they wanted to take him down using non-lethal force.
Yeah.
But nobody had it on them, so instead one officer apparently just took it upon himself to kill the man.
Yeah.
This officer has been charged, and we're pending the trial on that officer. Wow. All right, moving along to a case right here in California.
Yeah, troubling.
We talked earlier at the first show of this year. We talked about a new law in California that says that for digital things like emails and phone calls, that the authorities need a search warrant.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So now we've found out that in the city of Anaheim, home of Disneyland, for the last 6
was it 2009?
2009, that the Anaheim Police Department has been intercepting and listening to cell phone calls.
Yeah.
So how did they do this?
Well, they're using something called a dirt box, and it's a complicated technology that basically is able to reroute cell phone data as if it were a cell tower, and they're able to collect the cell phone data that way. You place a dirt box on an aircraft, and that's how it operates, and basically kind of go through cell phone encryption to get the data. And so they've been monitoring everyone. And it looks like
anybody that like is within the area whose cell phone sort of taps into that.
Exactly, of Orange County. And so you're looking at, because they lent this technology to different departments or all around Orange County. So you're looking at the 3 million residents of Orange County and up to 16 million people that visit Disney World and Disneyland annually.
With no warrant.
No warrant whatsoever.
All right, so it seems to me that this is against the law, but who can hold them accountable, if anyone?
Well, I think the state government's going to have to hold them accountable. I mean,
under what law?
They just passed the California Electronic Communications Privacy Act. It went into effect January 1st, 2016. So if the allegations show there was no violations after this, they may be in the clear. But if this is something that's ongoing and continues, then there's certainly a violation of that new act.
Right, because this act doesn't go backwards in time.
No.
It's only from this year forward. So I wonder what exactly they were after.
Well, the idea is that they're also capturing criminals' phone calls as well. And so they're able to, intercept those. However, you're getting everyone's phone calls, so that's the problem.
Gotcha. All right. Okay, well then finally, wow, we were not kidding when we said we had an abbreviated show. I didn't know it would be this short.
This one may take a little bit longer though, yeah.
That's true, because this one is something similar to the Making a Murderer show that we're about to cover. This one is for a California man who is on death row.
Yeah, a little bit more dire.
Yeah, so the state of California had placed a moratorium on executions until November, and it lifted that moratorium. And now there is a man, Kevin Cooper, who is facing execution. There's no date set at the moment, but it's imminent. Yeah. As all of his appeals have been exhausted. But when you look at this case, it smells, it feels a whole lot like the kind of thing that we saw in Making a Murderer. So there was a family that was literally hacked to death in a really terrible story inside their own home in Chino Hills, which is in Orange County. No, is that Orange County or Riverside County? I think it's Riverside County, perhaps. And so somebody entered, or persons entered this home and literally hacked to death a mother, father, and 2 children. Yep. And one child, an 8-year-old son, survived having his throat slashed. Yep. When originally asked, he said it was either 3 white men
or Hispanic guys that came in and
that did it. Yet we have a black man named Kevin Cooper on death row for these murders. Yeah. There were several things that were just screaming like this is totally crazy, not cool, and that there was major violations of due process rights and fairness. And some Court of Appeals judges have even said that the state may be putting to death an innocent man.
Yeah.
What are some of the reasons why those judges?
Well, yeah, let's point out we had five judges on the Ninth Circuit when they reviewed the appeal. 5 said we might be putting to death an innocent man. What really this case dealt with was the prosecution's exculpatory evidence that they did not hand over to the defense. And if people don't know what that is when the prosecution actually has a duty to hand over to the defense information they've gathered that would be helpful to the defense, factual information.
So this is not like a voluntary thing, it's mandatory. So when the prosecution has something that they know could even slightly be of help to the defense, they have to turn it over.
Yeah, as long as it's a factual thing. It's, they don't have to argue for the defense by any means. And one of those things was the prosecution presented evidence that there was a prison shoe, because Kevin Cooper had escaped from prison on a burglary charge.
A minimal security facility.
From a burglary charge. And that prison shoe that issued was the print of what was found in the home. And the warden came out and said that's factually not true.
Right. So the police officer, somebody had testified that shoe is not available for sale in the public.
Yeah,
so
it's
that
only
shoe
a prison
print
issued shoe.
Must have come from a prison issued shoe. Mm-hmm. And then the warden said that's not true, but the warden didn't say that on the stand.
Said it to the prosecution.
Exactly.
And the prosecution never turned over that testimony to the defense.
Right.
And so that was a big problem. Another big issue was the blood. So they tested some blood that it did not match Kevin Cooper's that was found at the scene. And they retested the blood, and then it did match Mr. Cooper's. However, the prosecution changed the original finding, so it was never clear that there was one false test.
Right, and didn't turn that over.
And then more recent testing showed that what was found, there were 2 strands of DNA found in that blood vial. So that blood vial was contaminated with 2 separate strands of DNA, Mr. Cooper's and someone else's.
Right, and so it could be an inconclusive test, or it could point to somebody else.
And the defense never had knowledge. As far as the defense knew, a test was made and it matched Kevin Cooper's DNA.
Right. And then there was a woman who said that her estranged husband could very have likely been the one to do this, and that he came home that night with blood splatter on some pants.
And he's now missing. Yeah. So the husband's missing, and there's blood splatter on his coveralls.
So she turns over these pants, coveralls, over to the police.
Yeah, and wasn't he missing a hatchet too?
Correct. His hatchet was missing
also.
too. And instead of testing those pants, the police dumped
Literally
them.
throw them in the garbage.
Unbelievable. And then also somebody saw on the night of the murder 3 white or Hispanic men driving down a dead-end road in a station wagon.
Yep.
And the family...
Station wagon had been stolen.
Right. So lots of things to line up a case against 3 white or Hispanic men.
But let's say, let's just add that Josh Ryan's testimony, the young kid, who initially said it was 3 white or Hispanic men, ended up changing his story at the time and said that it was Kevin Cooper that was in his home, and Kevin Cooper that did these things to him, and that was largely influential in his conviction.
Right. But, as we know, these kids are very susceptible to pressure.
We'll talk about Brendan Dassey in the Making a Murderer special.
Absolutely.
And now Josh at the time was only 8.
Right. And so, and Kevin Cooper himself doesn't even blame Josh, knows that he was a young kid at the time, and there was a lot of pressure on him to go along with the story that everybody wanted to say happened, so that there could be certainty that the streets were safer. So now, all the appeals have been exhausted. So even, the Court of Appeals, there were several judges, 5 of them, that said this guy could very well be innocent, but yet the majority decided to not, mistrial or get a new trial, nothing. They just let it go forward.
Even though they felt the district court had not followed its order when it came to testing the blood again.
And they even said that the prosecutors acted unlawfully in this case. And yet, this man is still on death row. And so his only chance is now an appeal to Governor Jerry Brown.
For a pardon,
You're right.
And I think one thing that was actually very... on this show, we talk a lot about the disparity between race and the police and, justice. But one thing Kevin Cooper said was, it doesn't matter about race. Everyone, no matter what race they are on death row, they're poor.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a big, big problem in this country, is that poor people are not getting justice whatsoever. And so regardless of race, we need to make sure that we have a system that's a little bit more equitable. And,
I think that's a fair statement. And pretty powerful. He says, I am innocent, and it's not my execution, it's my murder.
Yeah.
So if you feel so inclined, you can actually, perhaps petition the governor, Jerry Brown, to look very closely at this case. It's interesting, in the Stephen Avery case, there was a bunch of people, hundreds of thousands of people, that petitioned President Obama to do something about this. But he has no power over this situation. Yeah. But in this case, the governor does have power to look at this case closely and issue a pardon if he sees fit. So, if you'd like to be involved, there is one way. Other than that, we will bring you the latest on that story and the rest. Yes. Okay, guys, that is it for our abbreviated show today on this February 3rd, 2016. Thank you for joining me and Shaka. We will be back next week with another full-length episode of Justice is Served.
And download us on iTunes, and give us your comments on Twitter and on YouTube.
And don't forget to join us over on AfterBuzz TV for the special of Making a Murder.
From executives Kevin Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio. Instagram me @KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood Redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.